Okay, so to start, Brandon, can you share a bit about the macro energy transition as you're seeing it? What are you seeing at the policy level following the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act?
Sure. Okay, I think you can hear me now. So just for perspective, I spent 17 years in Silicon Valley startups, did business development and government relations, and spent about 5+ years trying to get some legislation through that was finally incorporated into the Inflation Reduction Act. And excited to say that I can quote several speakers from earlier today. Commissioner Chung said, "This is funding palooza." The funding associated with the BIL and the IRA is like nothing else it's ever been. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The CHIPS Act is worth $280 billion. Clean energy policy and incentives are worth another $370 billion. There's all kinds of community activations going on at the Department of Energy and at the federal level. Same type of funding is happening at the state level. Again, because I tend to focus on technology and energy, I'm focusing on those at the state level too, but we just saw the Cal MTA just get launched for $300 million on energy efficiency, market transformation initiatives, and then last week, California just ratified a $922 million Equitable building decarbonization initiative to decarbonize and create energy efficient retrofits in affordable housing. And that is extremely relevant to this room. Over the last 18 months, I've thought about it, and I've worked with a handful of startups and looked at incentives of in excess of $600 million, just for me and my team. So there's a lot of money coming out. And some of those are as small as $5 million, some of them are as large as $195 million. So the technologies change, the applications change, the business strategies change, and the asks that they have of the government change. And I didn't think that was helpful to go through that list for this room today, but there's one thing that's really common among every one of those incentives, and that is the Justice 40 initiative, right? And what the Justice 40 initiative says is that 40% of the money and 40% of the business of the benefits have to go to disadvantaged communities. And so if you look at an application, whether it's for $5 million or $50 million, there's a community benefits plan that is fully a third of the document. And it is scored at 20%, and while that doesn't sound like much, it's the difference between a C on a test and an A on a test. And so I tell you that because the people in this room, the work that you're doing, it has power and it has relevancy to this program. And so all of these technology startups need engaged communities that have solutions that need to be solved and are able to articulate them as part of these proposals. I'll finish with just a story, two stories. Talking to a new agency a new office that was stood up in the DOE. They were trying to deploy $6 billion by this summer, and they did it. The program manager of that office was an economic development person from Buffalo, New York. She says, "I don't know anything about technology. This is not about technology. It's about community development and enhancement." And that's the theme of the day. We were just talking to the DOE last week, and what they've said is in looking at these proposals, again, from $5 to $50 to $500 million, they've stopped looking at the technology assessment. They start with the community benefits. And if it doesn't score 15 points or higher, they throw it away because they're not going to move it forward. And so he says we've rejected perfect technical documents because they're not relevant to the community. And so it's brilliant. I think it's such a powerful change. And, the people applying for these need to come into our communities and talk to the people that have the needs and are getting the work done to make a better project. And I think you get community buy-in, you have a company that's aligned with the community, and you create a lot of good out of it. So if I could leave you with one thought, it's the power of the community organizations to really make these projects better.
Well, thank you, Brandon. I think something that's top of mind here, especially as we're looking at a kind of community-centric conference, is, how does this come to our community? And so I want to ask kind of the next question to Evan here. Given the really growth now of this sector, this windfall of capital that's coming to these companies, what are you seeing really from the front lines in terms of new job opportunities from the climate tech sector that's frankly stayed very resilient even in this kind of economic downturn? What are you seeing in terms of new job opportunities, new economic opportunity?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me here. So first, by way of introduction, my name is Evan. I'm CEO and co-founder at ClimateBase. We're the leading platform for climate careers. We serve about 250,000 users every month, helping folks discover opportunities, job opportunities within climate, but also serving them with education and community to help them along their journey. To answer your question at a very, very high level, I'll reference Deloitte's recent report that they put out a few months ago called Work Towards Zero. This was basically an entire report examining the intersection of climate solutions, economic growth, and jobs. So what does this mean for average everyday people that exist within the economy? They predict that over the coming decades, we'll see roughly 300 million new climate jobs come online. These are jobs that are not yet created. But I also want to emphasize that already today, there are millions of people globally that work in climate. Climate is not this new or particularly niche sector. In fact, it's not a single sector. It's a lens through which you see our entire economy. And within that, there are organizations working in energy, working in transportation, working in food and ag, and many other industries and sectors that are working on climate solutions. And of course, there are organizations that are not. So what we're seeing right now, I was just mentioning that we can predict this very large growth of climate jobs. But what we're seeing right now is already the beginning of that. We weren't around as an organization until 2020. So we've only been around for, just coming up on 4 years now. The growth that we've seen of users on our platform has been entirely driven through word of mouth. We don't run ads. We haven't done any influencer campaigns. We're not on TikTok yet. We will be. And you should follow us, ClimateBase, at ClimateBase on TikTok. But I like to highlight that because it actually shows that this is a area of growth that is being mirrored by interest from job seekers. There's a tremendous number of people globally that want to make sure that their income is aligned with their values, is aligned with the work that needs to be done to address the climate crisis. And there are people that don't want to just sit on the sidelines. And there are people that are active in the space, but they want to go further. They want to make sure that they're not just showing up at protests, that this isn't a side project for them, that this is their full-time focus. And I think that this is a really unique element of the climate job space. I come from, personally, my background is in ed tech, in recruiting, education. I haven't ever seen that kind of interest from the workforce in terms of their enthusiasm for getting involved in a new sector. And it's also a very diverse workforce that we're talking about. This isn't just a bunch of tech bros that are interested in Web3 stuff. This is like, if you can imagine a very specific kind of person with a very specific kind of background, I assure you there's someone that uses ClimateBase that mirrors that kind of background. So massive growth in this space, and we will continue to see more of that as we continue to see more capital pouring in, and paired with it is a workforce of people who are ready to step into action.
Yeah, Evan, I think you have a really insightful piece there about, just this word of mouth growth. I think it signals kind of a larger, almost zeitgeist shift in the social kind of norm. And if I remember correctly, in January, you all were at about 100,000 people per month. And now that you're up at 250,000, I think that really just signals how much more attention there is in the shift in kind of the social expectations and desires and demand for kind of working in this sector.
Yeah, and part of that is also because our platform is a marketplace at its core, and there's network effects that come out of that. The more people who hear about it, the more people will hear about it, type of thing. A year before, we were at about 20,000. So wow. It's been a nice up and to the right exponential growth curve. But I think that, it's also just important to note that this is not a new space. I think this is a rebranding of work that's been happening for many, many decades, right? And, I think we've called it different things, right? Clean energy was kind of seen as its own thing. And then, separately, you have climate action. In fact, if we look at the UN's SDG framework, right? I'm sure many of you here are familiar with the SDGs. They are kind of weirdly classified. You have climate action as its own thing, but then you also have biodiversity and healthy ecosystems, and you also have access to water and food. You also have clean energy, and actually, climate is all those things, right? It's not its own separate category. So, for those of you here, I'm sure there are many of you who have been working in this space, working on this problem for a long time. I want to acknowledge that we're not doing, the climate workforce isn't just a new thing that's happening right now. It's more of a new way of thinking about it, and it's a new label that we can put on it that's going to attract the mission-driven talent that these organizations need in order to succeed in scaling climate solutions.
Well said. Well, now I want to pass it on to Tiffany here, kind of speaking now from the public sector and kind of jumping off of a bit of what Brandon said in terms of how central equity is to much of this. How are you ensuring that local communities are tapping into the resources that are available in an equitable way, that it's available to all? And also, can you tell us a little bit about the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Working Group?
I sure can. I sure can. Thanks, Walt. So I'm Tiffany Wisefuss. I'm the Sustainability and Climate Action Manager at the City of Santa Cruz, and I am one of your on-the-ground implementers of all of this kind of work with respect to climate, both in terms of emissions reductions and climate adaptation, how we deal with the impacts of climate change. And I work with our community, I work with our nonprofit partners, I work with our departments, not just on a local scale, but on a regional scale, we're very focused on securing transformative investment for climate in an equitable way. And so I'm excited to share with you a couple of things, first about what the City of Santa Cruz is doing and getting to those questions, but also what's happening on a regional scale, because there is a lot happening, and I don't think a lot of people know what's going on with respect to climate and collaboration on the regional scale. So in the City of Santa Cruz, we adopted our latest climate action plan in 2022. We have an ambitious target of carbon neutrality by 2035. And we're in the process right now of updating our climate adaptation plan, or how we deal with various climate hazards. And for the first time, extreme heat enters into our consciousness and having to plan, which is very interesting. On the emissions mitigation side of things, we're very focused on transportation, where 70% of our regulated emissions come from transportation. We just relaunched our bike share, which is huge. That is county-wide, so again, getting to those collaborative principles that were so well articulated in the prior session, the prior panel. We also have the entire length of the trail portion of the rail trail in the city fully funded. That should be constructed in the next few years, the finishing segments of that area. We're also getting ready to bring an alternative to our natural gas prohibition in new buildings to council next month. So that's building decarbonization. And next year, we're going to be working on existing buildings. On the equity piece with respect to the city and emissions mitigation, we're just getting ready to submit a HUD Pro Housing grant proposal for an affordable housing and climate resilience effort in frontline communities, specifically in our Beach Flats neighborhood in Santa Cruz, which is one of our lower income neighborhoods, a high degree of folks that don't speak English as their first language. We've been doing a lot of relationship building in the Beach Flats to understand what the priorities are, and I'm really proud that this grant proposal that we're submitting to HUD is hitting 4 of the 5 priorities that the residents have articulated, and those are around housing, infrastructure, programming, public safety, and environment. So I feel really privileged to be able to work with folks to bring these kind of community-driven ideas to fruition, where there's win-wins both in affordable housing and climate resilience and decarbonization. On the adaptation side of things, of course, many of you have seen what's happened with Westcliff Drive at the beginning of the year. We're working on developing a 50-year vision for what the community wants Westcliff to look like. And then, of course, I'm the person that's going to help get us there, right, and carry that out. And we are on that same vein. We're getting ready to launch a Living Shorelines, Nature-Based Solutions, and sand management feasibility study to make sure we fully understand the range of adaptation options that are available to us on the coastline. We also have a flood control and climate change study that's coming online at the start of the year as well. That project in particular, again, engages with the beach flats. We've also worked with our unhoused community who really are out experiencing what is happening during these storms and are really good inputs into how do we structure these projects to ensure that we are putting equity first, that we're really bringing not just voice, but trying to build folks into representation in city committees and commissions and decision-making. But I'm really excited also about the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Project Working Group. It's a mouthful, we'll just call it the Working Group. This is a consortium of San Benito County, Santa Cruz County, Monterey County, City of Santa Cruz, and City of Watsonville, where the cities came together and recognized there is an unprecedented amount of money that is coming down the pike, and that if we are not well-positioned, and if we're not going together as a region to compete, we're going to miss out. And it is really our opportunity to make that transformative change. That group was formed by charter at the beginning of the year. It took about a year to spin it up. We have also been working to stand up and I don't want to take credit for this because it's really Nancy Fostich at Regeneration in Pajaro Valley and a number of other environmental justice groups. Ecology Action's also really working on standing up a climate justice collaborative. That's also, this working group's been working with to make sure that folks have a seat at the table. But this working group, we've been able to apply for 6 grants. We've landed 2 of them. We have 4 pending, and we have $31 million right now out there waiting to hear if we've landed. We focused together on mutual priorities, specifically $15 million for public EV charging, which for Santa Cruz is going to scale us up by a factor of 10. And we also just recently applied last week to a California Air Resources Board, another almost $16 million for municipal fleet electrification and EV charging. So for us in Santa Cruz, 31 vehicles, it will allow us to comply with CARB's regulations and then the charging coming with it. We also have pending through the state a climate adaptation implementation and funding plan where we all have some common interests and common priorities around adaptation. What's the funding pathway that we're going to take to get there? We know that grants are not going to solve everything for climate. What are the additional maybe revenue sources that we can generate? Climate resilience districts gets thrown around a lot. And what else can we tap? Climatize is another, potential, the partnership with private sector. So we have a lot going on here. And again, I really want to emphasize the importance of there's so many groups in here, nonprofits, that aren't climate nonprofits or environmental justice nonprofits, but they come to the table on climate, and everyone wants to work together on climate. And I think that's so special about the climate space. And I'm really proud of our region really trying to lift up nonprofits, environmental justice groups in this space, because it is essential. When folks from frontline communities are lifted up, we all lift up, right? So I think I'll end there.
Perfect. Well, that was a really great segue to now ask Gino, given what Tiffany was mentioning in terms of public EV charging access, that brings the kind of equity conversation really to the forefront in terms of how do we make sure that everyone has access to the infrastructure necessary, to be able to even use the tools of the energy transition like EVs. Through your work at Ecology Action, could you tell us a little bit about kind of the role of nonprofits and advocacy within, accelerating the energy transition?
Is this thing on? it's working. Yes, thank you. So again, my name is Gino Garcia, and I work with Ecology Action. I'm a planner. I'm also a council member for the city of Monterey, full disclosure. But I wanted to share some information about how great an opportunity in terms of the positioning for nonprofits at the moment to really have a meaningful impact with community throughout our region. So Ecology Action has been around for about 50 years, and we operate nationwide with about 100 employees, $20 million budget annually. We partner up with municipalities, local agencies, organizations, individuals, to make those improvements in our communities that will have a positive impact on everybody's lives. And in the past 5 years or so, partnering up with local jurisdictions, we've been able to secure funding for transportation grants, active transportation grants to the tune of about $200 million. And what that does is that it brings all this opportunity to our communities to again, really think about how to move the needle in terms of just improving our climate, our environment through transportation improvements. So talking about bike and ped infrastructure, talking about EVs, charging stations, you name it. So the planning process, right, is really what gets jurisdictions prepared, not only in terms of the planning, but also situating them or positioning them in a way where they're very competitive for implementation grants. So I mentioned $200 million in terms of planning grants. Well, that has also produced implementation grants to the tune of about 115 million. Mixing my numbers there. So it's a good opportunity there, right, to leverage those connections that we have in community for the improvement of our neighborhoods, our jurisdictions, and our whole region. But going more specific to the point of working with community, this is also a great opportunity to have community or actual residents who are the experts, right, in really defining what are those concerns, what are those risks in our region that we really need to address. And I can give an example of the work that we're doing in South Monterey County. So we're currently working with 4 cities, Gonzales, Soledad, Greenfield, and King City, in a participatory budgeting process where residents who, some of which have never had really the opportunity to be at the decision-making table, are now participating. I've had residents come to me and say, hey, Gino, you know, I wasn't so sure about participating in this because, you know, I'm shy and I don't feel like really my voice matters. But I'm glad I'm glad your team encouraged us to come. You know, it took me a few meetings to really get more comfortable with the process. But throughout the process, I've understood why it is that for me to say, this is what matters to me, and then get put on paper, and then get pushed over to our electeds, right? That's where the process really becomes real for community. So, and community it becomes very engaged because they can see the actual progress, right? They can see that they had an opinion, they can see that it was put down in a planning document, and then they also go and advocate for these projects during the council meetings where electeds are adopting these plans, right? So that's something critical, and I think we've heard it here throughout the day, right, that, it's all about partnerships, right? It's all about working together, not only for agencies, right, not only for nonprofits, but working really in community, because at the end of the day, community, they're the experts.
Well, great, thank you. So now as we have kind of a couple parting thoughts here, as we think about the energy transition through the lens of new jobs, new economic growth, new businesses, as a parting thought for each one of these people here as they return home to their communities, their businesses, their organizations, in just a few short words, how should they be thinking about capitalizing on this opportunity?
So capitalizing in terms of agencies in general, I kind of missed the last point.
As each person in this room returns home to their businesses, organizations, communities, how should they think about, really seizing the moment?
Yeah. So, I think in general, that something that I've learned in the time that I've been wearing the planner hat is that there's no one direct route, right? There's no one approach. Something that has served me well and that I would share with others is that whatever the item is that you're working on as an individual or an organization, get to learn, right, who are the players, who's involved or who's not involved, right, and understand those dynamics to really maximize those conversations and get everybody involved who needs to be involved and who should be involved. And that's, I think, the way that you capitalize, because the more folks you get involved who have really a stake in the item that you're trying to address, people rise to the occasion.
I would say, just as a quick thought, as you drive home, think about, what your priorities are, what your ask is, right? And say, and what you bring to the table, so that if a project comes along and they say, how do we become good members of this community? You have a well thought out answer, you know what's important to you, and you know who you can bring together to form a coalition to support that grant proposal. So I think doing that work early before the invitation comes helps you understand whether the person that walks through the door is a good fit for you or is not a good fit for you in your community.
I would say if you're an individual, look for the opportunities to be able to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, take advantage of some of those incentives that are out right now. Resilient Central Coast is a platform that's uniform around the Central Coast that Ecology Action helped to launch, that helps you understand your impact and take actions, whether it's emissions mitigation or resiliency. To Brandon's point, also, if your organization's interested in, hey, maybe we could do battery storage or solar or PV or a microgrid, let us know. We are looking for those partners. We're looking to move those things along. All of our climate action plans calls for partnership with private sector on those kinds of things. And there's money. So let's partner together on those things. And then lastly, the jobs. There are jobs and multiple entry points to this kind of work. Even groups like Your Future is Our Business with high school kids. There's lots of ways to find out what's coming on. I mean, I myself and I think many others, we have done career shifts to get into this field, and there's a lot of money coming for more jobs.
This is the working one. Here we go. Well, over the past 3.5 years, we've helped about almost 10,000 people get hired into climate work, into climate jobs through Climate Base. And that's a number that is, when I first got started on this, I was a that was like an unfathomable amount of people that we could help actually be not just users of climate-based, but success stories. But if we're expecting around 300 million new jobs to come online, then we still have about 999 million, et cetera, no, I'm doing the math wrong there. 299,99990 more to go. So my message would be, if you know someone who's eager to take action and isn't satisfied with only changing their consumptive behaviors, which they should also be absolutely working on and thinking about, but if you know someone who wants to join the climate workforce, I would encourage you to tell them about Climate-Base. We are a free resource. We don't charge job seekers to use our platform. And if you are with an organization that is working on climate in some manner, whether it's a government agency, a local agency, a private company, an investment fund, a nonprofit doing this work, whatever it might be, if you have roles open that you need filled, I would very much encourage you to come to Climate-Base because we want to help you out. But tell the people that you can work in climate. You can actually make money as an individual and have a really fulfilling career while also helping save humanity and save our planet.
Well, great parting thoughts. Thank you all so much for being part of this panel and for sharing how everyone can be part of the energy transition.